everybody, or so that I can demonstrate that I know more about, that I'm a better social justice person than you. There's a lot of that. I see it in my class too. I see students doing that to each other. So this was a community where there weren't egos involved like that. Instead, it was, we're all incomplete. So let's challenge each other as a community, but challenge each other with love, so there can be mutual growth instead of with judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So more like a support each other to reach another level or to grow, like.
Yeah, because we felt invested. We all felt invested in each other's growth, instead of feeling invested in demonstrating that we were a better social justice person than the other person.
I see. Okay. What values and assumptions drive your work, activism and advocacy work?
What values? Probably the. Well, there's. I think the underlying value of my work is that there is no way to create more justice without a direct confrontation with injustice. And so it's about just being honest and naming things very honestly and directly. It's about, I think intersectionality is a value that informs my activism. I also think a sense of humility, that knowing that I wasn't born with the consciousness I have now, and it took me a long time, and it's still not even a very deep consciousness. So having a sense of humility and how much growth I still need to do. I think those are probably the main values. I feel like one of my responsibilities in the world is to advocate for people who have less power than I have. And in any way I can do that. So, and feeling a big sense of empathy and connection with people who are marginalized. And not just people. I mean, I get depressed when I see a tree being cut down. So.
Right. So do you usually advocate for students or more like in community members?
Well, in the context of my work here, I advocate for students, but most of my activism is not on this campus.
Right.
Most of my activism is broader, and I teach my students, if you want to be an activist, you need to broaden beyond doing campus activism, and because this is, in some ways, this is an easy place to do activism. It's relatively safe. It's not, that doesn't mean it's easy or safe, but it's easier and safer than going off campus and doing it. So I think, but even here, I think advocating for students, advocating for faculty and staff of color or other marginalized identity faculty and staff, are things that I've done.
I see. Could you help me understand what it is like to do that? Like
the on-campus stuff, you mean?
both. But first is on campus, like advocate for staff and faculty, and then the students who have less power.
What it's like to do that? Do you mean sort of what it looks like or what it feels like?
First, how it looks like, and how do you...
Both, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it could be a lot of different things. It could be I find myself a lot going to people who are higher than me in the power chain
Mm-hmm.
and fighting for a student who I feel like is not being treated fairly,
Mm-hmm.
so that I'm making myself vulnerable instead of the student
Mm-hmm.
making herself or himself vulnerable. So it could look like that. It could be advocating for policy changes because there are policies. I mean, I've done that here quite a bit. Like, were you here when we were talking about all students doing a capstone, and we were started to create capstone courses?
Yep.
And I don't know if you were in the faculty meeting, but I caught a lot of flack because I said, well, it looks, because a bunch of the first batch of them that were being created, a lot of them were overseas sorts of things where students were going to have to spend a bunch of money.
Mm-hmm.
And my argument was, if we're requiring every student to take one of these, then we should not offer more options for students who have more money and fewer options for students who have the least amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the students with the least amount of money should have the most options because they have to work and all this
Mm-hmm.
other stuff. So my argument was there should not be a single capstone class that required extra money.
Mm-hmm.
And people did not like that, but you know, I think someone needed to say it, and so I'm the one who said it.
If I remember correctly, the EL credit thing, like we used to have a standalone EL,
Right.
you know, but starting this year we changed.
Right.
So that was your voice too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's you know, I'm a good and strategic advocate. So I've led a lot of curricular change here,
Mm-hmm.
but if you would ask a lot of people, because I do it strategically and I pick my spots.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a time when every student had to do a portfolio,
Mm-hmm.
and the feedback that faculty, you know, it was just very uneven. It's like, we can't force students to do this huge project at the end and then not take the time to give them feedback,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't have any evidence. But so over like 4 or 5 years, I kind of just chipped away at it, and now there's no portfolio.
4 to 5 years?
Yeah, it took a long
Wow.
time, yeah. Because people are so tied to, well, this is what we've always done, so
Mhm.
we have to always do it, so. Yeah, so it can look like that. I've gone and talked to people in the upper level administration here about